Hi, I'm Ellen from On the Lam. Today we're going to learn how to cast on 4 different methods. The first thing you need to know before you cast on is how to do a slip knot. To start with a slip knot, we're going to take our yarn. I'm using a worsted weight yarn and 4.5mm needles. All we have to do is make a circle with our yarn, pinch the top where the top yarn crosses over the bottom yarn. Now you see that the active yarn hangs behind. We just pull it through the circle and we make a loop. That is a slip knot. That's the beginning of all of our cast-ons, with the exception of one. And we use a cast-on because it does have the ability to get larger and to get smaller. Knitters never use knots. All right, the first cast-on. We're going to use just our thumb. This is a basic cast-on that we teach brand new knitters, often children. It's easy, it's not particularly tension happy, and it's not particularly beautiful, but it works. All you do is take the yarn over your hand and your fingers, give it a little twist to the back, and put that circle over top of your needle. This is called a thumb cast-on. Wrap it around, over the needle, tighten it down. We're tightening it gently so that our stitches are easy to slide up and down. If they don't slide up and down easily, we won't be able to get our secondary needle in. So again, we're just going to wrap the active end of the yarn around, make a slip knot, and gently pull. All right, we have our slip knot on our yarn, on our needle, on the left-hand needle. Now we're going to do the knitted cast on. We're going to use the first slip knot as the first stitch. We're going to take our needle in our right hand, insert the tip of our right hand needle into the stitch, crossing behind the left hand needle, taking your working yarn in your right hand, wrap around the back needle, between the 2 needles, pull that stitch through, and now we're going to just simply place it on top of the left hand needle, and voila, you have your second stitch. We're going to do that again. We're going to insert the tip of our right hand needle into the stitch from the bottom up behind the left hand needle, wrap our yarn around the back needle in between the 2 needles. That is the top of the new stitch. So what we need to do is bring that down through the old stitch. Here's the new stitch, and place it on the left hand needle. Now I'm tightening gently after each stitch, but remember we want to easily slide these stitches up and down the needle. One more time. In from the bottom, behind the left hand needle, wrap a yarn around in between the needles and pull the tip of the right hand needle gently down, catching the yarn you've wrapped in between the needles and placing that stitch on the left hand needle. And that's the knitted cast on. All right, now we're going to do the cable cast on. The cable cast on begins much as the knitted cast on. We're going to insert the tip of our needle into our slip knot, wrap our yarn around the back needle between the 2 needles, pulling the right hand needle down, catching the yarn that we had wrapped, bringing it out to the top, placing it on. That's our first stitch. Same as knitted cast on. Cable cast on differs in this direction. Instead of going into the stitch, we are going to go between the 2 stitches underneath both sides of the stitch that we had just cast on. So now I'm going to go in between, right underneath the first stitch, both sides, wrap my yarn around, bring the tip of my needle through, and on top of my left hand needle. You see that it's not quite lining up. It will line up as we move along. Now again, I'm going to go not into the stitch, I'm going to go through the 2 stitches in between the second stitch and the third stitch, right through. And we're going to wrap our yarn around, bring the tip of the needle through, and place on the left hand needle. You can see that the edging here resembles a bit of a cable, and that's why we call it the cable cast on. The last cast on I'm going to show you is called long tail cast on. This is easily the most popular cast on, and it's the one I use for almost everything. It gives you an elastic edge It's not too tight, it's not too loose, and it's pretty. Long tail cast on, you start with a long tail. How long should the tail be? Calculate about an inch for every stitch. When you're using very fine yarn, you're going to have excess. When you're using very heavy yarn, you should add more. But about an inch a stitch will work for casting on DK and worsted weight yarn. So I have about 2 feet here. I'm going to take my yarn. I'm holding it in my right hand. I'm going to put the yarn on either side of my thumb and my index finger. That's where I want my yarn to remain. Okay? Taking my first needle, I've draped my yarn on the outside of my thumb and outside of my index finger. I'm going to grasp them in the center of my palm, just like that, just so I can hang on to them and make sure they don't fly off everywhere. I'm going to take my needle right in the middle of my index finger and my thumb. Underneath the yarn, I'm going to pull it forward so it looks like a slingshot. Do you see how the yarn now crosses the yarn that's around my thumb and around the yarn that's around my index finger? Pull it forward. This is the position we want your needle and your yarn to be in for all of your cast on stitches. If it's over here, it's not going to work. Here, 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 here. It has to be pulled forward and down. Now what I do is I go under the yarn that's around my thumb, around the yarn that's on my index finger, and pull that index finger yarn back through my thumb. Allow the yarn to drop off your thumb and gently, gently, gently tighten your stitch. Now, assume the position of bringing your yarn back down and making it look like a slingshot. It must look like a slingshot for these stitches to work. Under my thumb, around my index finger, and pulling that yarn back through my thumb. Drop the yarn off your thumb and gently, gently, gently make your stitches. One more time. Back down directly in the elbow here between my thumb and my index finger. Under my thumb, around my index finger, and through my thumb again. Allow the yarn to drop off my thumb and gently, gently, gently tighten my stitches. Now you can see that they easily slide up and down. The yarn that's being used to create the stitches is from your long tail. That's why we have to have enough yarn in your long tail to create the number of stitches that you have to make on your needle. And that's long tail cast on. Thanks for joining us and learning how to cast on using the knitted cast on, the cable cast on, and the long tail cast on. Next time we're going to learn how to knit and how to purl. Join us, won't you? This is Ellen at On the Lamb in Uxbridge.